Welcome fam, please kindly like the video, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comment section. Alexander Reeves stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office watching the city slowly illuminate with the rising sun. At 42, he had built quantum innovations from nothing into a tech empire valued at over $3 billion. The glass tower bearing his company's name now dominated the skyline, a testament to his ruthless pursuit of perfection. Behind him, Maya Chin worked silently, organizing the day's materials with practiced efficiency. In the 6 months since he'd hired her, she had proven herself exceptional, anticipating his needs, solving problems before they arose, and maintaining an almost supernatural level of organization. Alexander barely noticed her anymore. She had become like oxygen. Essential but invisible until absent. He turned from the window, picking up the portfolio for the morning's board presentation. Flipping through the immaculate pages, he froze when he spotted a misaligned graph on page 17. His jaw tightened. In 6 months of flawless service, this was Maya's first mistake. Small, insignificant to most, but to Alexander, it represented the beginning of a crack in perfection. He said nothing, merely raising an eyebrow in Maya's direction. She immediately tensed, noticing his expression, and approached to see what had displeased him. When she saw the error, her face remained composed, but Alexander didn't miss the momentary flash of panic in her eyes. "I'll correct it immediately, Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands as she took the portfolio. Alexander nodded curtly and returned to the window, dismissing both her and the incident from his mind. Excellence wasn't negotiable at Quantum Innovations. Everyone knew that. 6 months earlier, Maya Chan had walked into Alexander's office for her final interview, one of 30 candidates for the executive assistant position. Unlike the others with their designer outfits and aggressive confidence, Maya had worn a simple, impeccably pressed black suit that had seen better days. What she lacked in flash, she made up for in substance. Her resume showed consistent employment with glowing references, though none at companies of Quantum's caliber. When asked why she wanted the position, she hadn't mentioned prestige or connections like the others. "I believe in efficiency, Mr. Reeves," she had said simply. "I believe in making things work so well they become invisible." Something about her quiet determination had resonated with Alexander. He'd hired her against his HR director's recommendation, who had pushed for a more dynamic candidate. Within weeks, Maya had transformed his professional life. Meeting materials appeared as if by magic. Client preferences were remembered and accommodated without prompting. Problems were solved before they reached his desk. Most remarkably, she did it all without seeking recognition or engaging in office politics. While other executives complained about their assistant's personal dramas and emotional needs, Alexander's assistant remained a mystery to everyone. She arrived early, left late, never mentioned family or friends, and declined invitations to office happy hours with a polite smile. Rumors circulated she was a robot, an alien, secretly wealthy and working for fun. The truth was, nobody knew anything about Maya Chan beyond her impeccable work performance. Alexander preferred it that way. He didn't need another person in his life. He needed a flawless system. And for 6 months, that's exactly what Maya had been. The first sign of trouble came on a Monday when Maya arrived 7 minutes late. Alexander noticed immediately. Her desk was empty when he arrived, something that had never happened before. She rushed in breathless, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, a damp spot on her blouse suggesting spilled coffee. "I apologize for my tardiness, Mr. Reeves," she said, quickly settling at her desk. Alexander merely nodded, making a mental note but saying nothing. By Wednesday, she was late again, this time by 12 minutes. More concerning were the subtle changes in her appearance, the same blouse as yesterday, dark circles under her eyes poorly concealed with makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail rather than her usual neat bun. During the afternoon client meeting with Singapore investors, Alexander caught her stifling a yawn, her focus momentarily slipping as the CFO presented quarterly projections. While no one else would have noticed these minor infractions, to Alexander, they stood out like sirens. He had built his reputation on the philosophy that excellence wasn't something you achieved occasionally. It was a standard you maintained every minute of every day. His own father, a factory foreman, had drilled this into him. Slip once, you'll slip again. Excellence has no off days. In board meetings, Alexander was known for saying, "Mediocrity is a choice disguised as circumstance." He believed this absolutely. Whatever personal issues Maya might be experiencing, they had no place affecting her professional performance. By Friday, his patience had worn thin. When she handed him the wrong folder for his executive lunch meeting, quickly correcting the error before anyone noticed, Alexander made his decision. Second chances weren't part of his management philosophy. Quantum Innovations had a waiting list of qualified candidates eager for any opening. Maya Chun had been exceptional, but exceptional was the minimum requirement, not a special achievement. Monday morning, Alexander called Maya into the main conference room. The glass walls offered no privacy. A deliberate design choice in a company where transparency was valued above comfort. "Close the door, please," he said, not looking up from his tablet as she entered. Maya stood perfectly still, hands clasped before her, waiting. Alexander finally raised his eyes to meet hers. "Your performance has declined over the past 2 weeks," he stated flatly. "Is there something I should know?" Maya's face remained composed, but her knuckles whitened as she clasped her hands tighter. "No, Mr. Reeves. I understand your concerns and take full responsibility." Alexander waited, expecting more, an explanation, an excuse, a promise to improve. None came. Her silence irritated him further. "I've built this company on consistent excellence, Ms. Jin. You've demonstrated that capability, which makes your recent performance all the more disappointing." Still, Maya offered no defense. She simply nodded, accepting his words without protest. Alexander found her silence almost disrespectful. Not defiant exactly, but as if she were somewhere else entirely, going through the motions of this conversation while her mind grappled with something he couldn't see. "I'll need your key card and company devices before you leave today. HR will process your final paycheck." The words hung in the air between them. For just a moment, something flickered across Maya's face, not surprise or anger, but a flash of pure desperation quickly masked. "I understand," she said quietly. "Thank you for the opportunity." That was it. No questions, no pleas, no negotiations. As Maya turned to leave, Alexander felt a momentary unease. Had he missed something? But he quickly dismissed the thought. Business was business. Sentiment had no place in his world. Through the glass walls, he watched as Maya packed her few personal items, while colleagues pretended not to stare. Within 15 minutes, she was gone, leaving behind only a meticulously organized desk and a company now facing the inconvenience of her absence. Within days, Alexander regretted his decision. Not enough to reverse it, he never second-guessed himself publicly, but enough to recognize that Maya's replacement, Jessica, while perfectly competent, lacked her predecessor's seamless efficiency. Meetings ran 5 minutes behind. Documents required double-checking. Client preferences were forgotten. Small irritations accumulated like paper cuts. "The Chun files," Alexander would say automatically, forgetting that Jessica wouldn't know his shorthand for quarterly projections organized by region rather than division. "I'll create those right away," Jessica would respond brightly, missing the point that Maya would have had them ready without being asked. In the executive meeting, Alexander found himself snapping at the marketing director over a minor discrepancy in the presentation. "This wouldn't have happened with Maya," he muttered, instantly regretting the comment when he saw Jessica's face fall. Later that afternoon, board member Victoria Langley lingered after the others had left. "Trouble with the new assistant?" she asked casually. Alexander shrugged. Adjustments. Nothing significant. Victoria studied him thoughtfully. You know, I was reviewing attendance records for the annual report. Did you realize Maya Chin never took a single sick day? Not one in 6 months. Alexander hadn't known that. She came in on Thanksgiving weekend to prepare for the Asian market opening. Victoria continued. Security logs show she was here until 3 a.m. twice during the Nakamura merger. Alexander frowned. He hadn't authorized overtime for those dates. She never logged the hours, Victoria said, reading his expression. I only noticed because security mentioned it. As Victoria left, Alexander sat at his desk, a nagging discomfort settling over him. Maya had gone above and beyond without seeking credit or compensation, and he had dismissed her without a second thought, without bothering to ask a single question about what might have caused her sudden change in performance. For the first time in years, Alexander Reeves wondered if he had made a mistake. 3 weeks after Maya's departure, Alexander was working late, searching for a specific contract template in the shared drive. Frustrated by the inefficient filing system Jessica was still learning, he yanked open his desk drawer, remembering that Maya had kept backup copies of essential documents. Among the neatly labeled folders, he found a slender black notebook he didn't recognize. Opening it, he discovered pages of Maya's precise handwriting, detailed contingency plans for every major project, client notes capturing preferences never documented in the CRM system, and problem-solving frameworks for common issues. The level of thought and care was stunning. Flipping through, Alexander found something even more surprising. Late-night entries showing she'd worked through weekends and holidays without logging hours. Finished Johnson presentation, 2:14 a.m. Need to revise final slides after Henderson provides Q3 figures. Return at 6:30 to complete before morning meeting. The entries were matter-of-fact, without complaint. As Alexander closed the notebook, a small photograph slipped out. It showed Maya smiling more brightly than he had ever seen at work, her arm around an elderly Asian woman in a hospital bed. A young boy of perhaps 8 or 9 leaned against Maya, his features suggesting he was her brother. The boy wore thick glasses and held a math textbook proudly displayed for the camera. On the back, a day from 4 months ago and 3 words, Mom's good day. Alexander stared at the image, feeling like an intruder in a private world Maya had never mentioned. The woman's hospital setting, her frail appearance despite her smile, the boy's dependence on Maya, all suggested complications in Maya's personal life that she had kept completely separate from her professional persona. For the first time, Alexander wondered what else he didn't know about his perfect assistant who had suddenly become less than perfect. The personnel file gave little information beyond the basics. Emergency contact, herself, address, an apartment in Westbrook District. Previous employment, administrative roles at smaller companies. Alexander sat in his car outside his building, the address entered into his GPS, debating the wisdom of this impulse. What exactly did he hope to accomplish? Maya had been gone nearly a month. The company was adjusting. Yet the photograph and notebook nagged at him, along with Victoria's comments about Maya's unlogged hours. Something didn't add up, and Alexander had built his career on solving inconsistencies. 20 minutes, he told himself. Just drive by, satisfy your curiosity, then let it go. The GPS led him away from the gleaming downtown district, past the university area, and into increasingly modest neighborhoods. Westbrook wasn't dangerous, but it was far from where he'd expected someone of Maya's caliber to live. The address led to a small commercial strip with convenience stores, a pawn shop, and a 24-hour laundromat with flickering fluorescent lights. Alexander checked the address again, certain there must be an error. This couldn't be right. There were no residential buildings, just the laundromat, sunshine clean, with its windows fogged from the humidity inside. Alexander parked across the street, confusion turning to curiosity. Had Maya provided a false address? Was the personnel file incorrect? He was about to leave when he noticed a familiar silver sedan parked at the side of the building. The same modest, well-maintained car he'd seen Maya drive out of the company parking garage. Alexander checked his watch. 11:23 p.m. What was his former assistant doing at a laundromat near midnight? Alexander waited, a voice in his head questioning his sanity. CEOs didn't stake out laundromats looking for fired employees. Yet he couldn't leave without understanding. Shortly after midnight, Maya appeared, emerging not from the laundromat but from the car itself. She looked exhausted, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, so different from her crisp work attire that Alexander almost didn't recognize her. Most shocking was the small boy at her side, clearly the same child from the photograph, now half asleep as she gently guided him toward the laundromat entrance. Through the windows, Alexander watched as Maya fed quarters into a washing machine, efficiently sorting clothes while the boy curled up on a row of plastic chairs, a jacket serving as his pillow. She spread homework across a folding table, reviewing papers while keeping an eye on the machines. The scene was so at odds with the Maya he knew, the impeccable professional, that Alexander felt like he was watching a stranger. Yet there was the same methodical efficiency, the same quiet dignity in how she handled her tasks. After an hour, she transferred clothes to dryers, then returned to the table where she appeared to be paying bills, calculator in hand, shoulders increasingly tense as she worked through what looked like difficult math. The boy stirred, and Maya immediately went to him, smoothing his hair with such tenderness that Alexander had to look away, feeling like an intruder. When he looked back, she was helping the child with what appeared to be insulin testing, the medical procedure performed with practiced ease. The revelation hit Alexander with physical force. Maya Chin, his perfect executive assistant who had never once mentioned personal hardships, was homeless, living out of her car with what appeared to be a chronically ill child dependent on her care. For the next week, Alexander observed Maya's routine from a careful distance, pieces of her life coming into focus. Each morning, she drove her brother. Alexander learned his name was Eli from overhearing their conversations, to Westview Elementary by 7:30. The boy wore the same uniform daily, though it was always clean. Maya would then park in a cafe lot, change clothes in her car, and spend hours at the public library, using their computers for what appeared to be job searching. 3 afternoons a week, she picked Eli up and took him to free medical clinics for what Alexander surmised were diabetes treatments. The other days, Eli attended an after-school program while Maya worked evening shifts cashiering at a grocery store, a job far below her capabilities that had her on her feet for 8-hour stretches. The small family slept in the car most nights, parked behind the laundromat where the owner seemed to have an arrangement with them. Twice a week, they visited the YMCA, presumably to shower. On Friday, Alexander watched as Maya withdrew cash from an ATM, carefully counting out bills and separating them into envelopes labeled Eli's medicine, gas, food, and mom. The last envelope received the smallest allocation. That evening, instead of the laundromat, Maya drove to Lakeside Hospital on the north side of the city. Alexander followed at a distance, watching as she and Eli entered carrying small gift bags. They stayed for 2 hours. When they emerged, Eli was wiping tears while Maya kept her arm firmly around him, her own face a mask of controlled emotion. It was clear now why Maya's performance had slipped. The question that haunted Alexander was how she had maintained excellence for so long while carrying such burdens. More troubling was his own failure to notice, to ask, to see the human being behind the perfect assistant. On Sunday afternoon, Alexander made his way through the antiseptic corridors of Lakeside Hospital. At the information desk, he learned that Maya was visiting Juniper Chin in the oncology ward. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. In the visitor lounge, Alexander positioned himself behind a newspaper, watching as Maya sat with her mother, a small woman whose illness had clearly ravaged her body but whose eyes remained bright and alert. Eli sat nearby, drawing in a sketchbook. They spoke in low voices, too distant for Alexander to hear clearly, but the body language told a story of love and worry. After 30 minutes, a doctor approached, pulling up a chair beside Maya. Though Alexander couldn't hear their conversation, he could read the increasing tension in Maya's posture, the way her hands gripped each other until the knuckles turned white. The doctor showed her papers, bills, or treatment options, Alexander guessed. And Maya's head lowered briefly before she straightened her shoulders with visible effort. Insurance limitations, Alexander heard the nurse at the nearby station murmur to her colleague. 3 months of treatment coverage maxed out. Terminal anyway, but still. The nurses moved away, unaware of how their casual conversation had pierced Alexander. When the doctor left, Maya moved closer to her mother, taking thin hands in her own. "I promise, Mom," Alexander heard her say, voice carrying in a moment of intensity. "Eli will stay in school no matter what. I'll make it work." The fierce determination in her voice was the same quality that had impressed Alexander in her interview, that quiet, immovable commitment to making things work regardless of obstacles. Only now did he understand the true extent of that commitment and the personal cost Maya had been paying. Back in his penthouse that evening, Alexander stood at his window, the city lights blurring as his mind raced through the past month's revelations. In 6 months of working closely with Maya, he had never once asked about her life outside the office. He had valued her precisely because she seemed to have no outside life, no complications that might interfere with her work. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had fired her for letting personal problems affect her performance, never suspecting the magnitude of those problems or the strength it had taken to keep them at bay for so long. The glass of scotch in his hand remained untouched as memories surfaced from his own carefully buried past. His mother's early death. His father working double shifts at the factory. The constant eviction notices on their door. Alexander had escaped that life through relentless work and a scholarship, transforming himself into someone unrecognizable from that desperate boy. He had built quantum innovations with the explicit goal of never being vulnerable again, measuring every decision by how it reinforced his security and control. Somewhere along the way, that self-protective drive had hardened into something colder, a philosophy that dismissed human struggle as mere excuse-making. He had become the kind of man who fired a homeless woman with a sick mother and dependent child because she had been 7 minutes late. The revelation was physically painful, a tightness in his chest that felt like shame. Alexander Reeves, who prided himself on seeing patterns others missed, had failed to see the most important pattern of all, the humanity connecting him to those who worked for him. The question now was what responsibility, if any, he had toward his former employee, and whether any action he took now would be genuine helpfulness or merely an attempt to ease his own conscience. 3 days later, Alexander arranged to be at Lakeside Hospital during Maya's regular visiting hours. He timed his approach carefully, appearing to bump into her as she and Eli left the oncology wing. Maya froze when she saw him, instinctively moving her brother behind her in a protective gesture that spoke volumes. "Mr. Reeves," she said, her voice perfectly professional despite the obvious shock. "What brings you to Lakeside?" Alexander had rehearsed this moment, but facing Maya, seeing the wariness in her eyes, his prepared speech felt hollow. "A routine checkup," he lied, then immediately regretted it. "No, that's not true. I was hoping to speak with you." Maya's posture remained rigid, but she nodded. "Eli, why don't you get a snack from the vending machine?" she suggested, handing the boy a few dollars. Once Eli was out of earshot, Maya faced Alexander directly. "If this is about company property, I returned everything to HR." The quiet dignity in her voice made Alexander wince. "It's not about that," he said. I'd like to offer you your position back, with a significant increase in salary and benefits. Maya's expression shifted from surprise to something more complex, a mixture of longing and suspicion. Why? She asked simply. Alexander considered another lie. Restructuring Jessica's poor performance, but something in Maya's direct gaze demanded honesty. Because I made a mistake, he admitted. And because you're the best assistant I've ever had. Maya studied him for a long moment. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Reeves, but I can't accept charity. I failed at my job. The words were delivered without self-pity, as if stating an obvious fact. Alexander realized that Maya Chin, despite everything, still held herself to the same impossible standard of perfection he had demanded of her. They moved to the hospital cafeteria, Eli happily occupied with a pudding cup and handheld game at a nearby table. Over bitter coffee and styrofoam cups, Maya finally shared her story. Her mother's aggressive pancreatic cancer diagnosis had come 6 weeks after Maya started at Quantum. The insurance coverage was good, she explained, but Mom needed specialized treatment not fully covered by the plan. Eli's diabetes management is expensive too. The mounting bills had quickly overwhelmed their savings. Then their landlord had sold their apartment building to developers, giving tenants 30 days to vacate. The housing market is impossible right now, Maya said. Every affordable place has a waiting list. The extended stay hotels want first and last month's deposit plus security. We just didn't have it. They had stayed with friends briefly, but with her mother's deteriorating condition and Eli's special needs, Maya had quickly run out of options. The car was the only solution that let me keep working while keeping Mom's treatment going and Eli in his school. Alexander listened, horrified by the impossible choices Maya had been navigating. And you didn't mention any of this at work. It wasn't a question. Maya met his gaze steadily. You hired me to solve problems, not bring them to you. Personal issues aren't professional excuses. She was quoting Alexander's own management philosophy back to him, words he had repeated countless times in meetings and company-wide emails. The job at Quantum was our lifeline, Maya continued. The salary, the insurance, it was everything. When I started making mistakes, she trailed off, composing herself. I was sleeping about 3 hours a night, either in hospital chairs or the car. I thought I could push through it. The matter-of-fact way she described her situation without blame or self-pity made Alexander's chest tighten with something like respect mixed with shame. Maya Chin hadn't just been an excellent assistant, she had been performing a feat of superhuman endurance that would have broken most people within days, not months. I want to make you a proposal, Alexander said carefully after Maya finished her story. Not charity, but a business arrangement that benefits us both. Maya's expression remained guarded but attentive. Quantum needs you. That's simply a fact. I'm offering reinstatement at a director-level salary plus immediate enrollment in our premium healthcare plan that would cover your mother's treatments more comprehensively. Before Maya could object, he continued, additionally, the company owns several apartments near the office for visiting executives. One is vacant and would be available to your family immediately. Maya's composure wavered for the first time. Mr. Reeves Alexander, he corrected. If we're going to work together on this, I think first names are appropriate. This is very generous, but it's not generosity, it's investment, Alexander interrupted. In return, I want you to help develop a program, a safety net for employees facing unexpected crises. You understand the gaps in our system better than anyone. A flash of interest crossed Maya's face before uncertainty returned. I don't have experience creating programs like that, but you have experience living through the exact situation we're trying to address. That's more valuable than any MBA. Alexander leaned forward. This isn't charity, Maya. It's good business. Employee retention alone would justify the cost. Maya was silent for a long moment, conflict evident in her expression. Finally, she straightened. I have conditions, she said firmly. I want to earn everything. No special treatment at work. And any program we develop needs to be available to all employees, not just executives. The strength in her voice, the advocate emerging from the assistant, was exactly what Alexander had hoped to see. He smiled and extended his hand. "Those terms are acceptable. When can you start?" Maya hesitated only briefly before shaking his hand. "I need 3 days to get my mother transferred to a facility closer to the office and get Eli registered at his new school. Always practical, always focused on solving the next problem." Alexander nodded, wondering if Maya Chin had just saved him from himself as much as he was helping her. Maya's return to Quantum created an immediate stir. Rumors circulated. Alexander had discovered she was related to a major investor. She had threatened a lawsuit. She possessed damaging information about the company. The truth that Alexander Reeves had recognized a mistake and corrected it seemed too implausible to be believed. Jessica was reassigned to the marketing department where her social skills were better utilized. Maya slipped back into her role with characteristic efficiency, but subtle changes were evident. She now left precisely at 6 unless there was an urgent matter, prioritizing evenings with her family. Alexander found himself adjusting his own schedule accordingly, planning ahead rather than expecting instant accessibility. More significantly, he began breaking his own rule about separating the personal from professional. "How's Eli doing at school?" he might ask during a coffee break. Or, "Is the apartment working out?" Small questions that would have been unthinkable months earlier. Maya's answers were initially brief and formal, but gradually became more relaxed as she realized Alexander's interest was genuine. When her mother's condition worsened in late October, Maya didn't hide the situation. "I may need to adjust my hours this week," she informed him directly. "The hospice nurse has concerns about Mom's pain management." Rather than the defensive reaction she clearly expected, Alexander simply nodded. "Take whatever time you need. We'll manage." The look of surprise on Maya's face made Alexander realize how much his management philosophy had shifted. He was learning to see his company not as a machine requiring perfect cogs, but as a community of humans whose strength came precisely from supporting each other through inevitable imperfections. The transition wasn't always smooth. Alexander caught himself reverting to old patterns when stressed, making unreasonable demands or forgetting Maya's family commitments. But whereas before Maya would have silently accommodated these lapses at personal cost, she now calmly but firmly maintained appropriate boundaries. Strangest of all, Alexander found he respected her more for it. By December, the outlines of the employee crisis program were taking shape. Alexander and Maya met weekly to develop the framework, often working late into the evening. The problem with most corporate assistance programs, Maya explained during one session, is they're reactive and stigmatized. By the time someone asks for help, they're already drowning. Alexander nodded, remembering how Maya had hidden her situation until it became unmanageable. "What we need is proactive identification and seamless support that preserves dignity," she continued, warming to the topic. Temporary housing, emergency childcare, crisis loans with reasonable repayment options, streamlined medical advocacy. Her eyes lit up as she sketched possibilities, revealing a strategic mind that had been hidden behind the efficient assistant facade. At the January board meeting, Alexander presented their proposal. The resistance was immediate. "This is beyond the scope of corporate responsibility," argued CFO James Whitman. "These costs are completely unnecessary in the current market. Our employees' personal problems aren't the company's concern," added another board member. "This sets a dangerous precedent." Alexander had anticipated these objections. In the past, he would have agreed with them. Now, he stood firmly beside the presentation screen showing the projected costs and benefits. Quantum Innovations has always prided itself on seeing patterns others miss, he began. "We've failed to see a critical pattern, the hidden costs of employee crises. Last quarter alone, we lost 6 valuable team members to situations that could have been prevented with minimal intervention." He detailed turnover costs, training expenses, and productivity losses that far exceeded the proposed program budget. But it was when he shared Maya's story, with her permission, that the room fell silent. Without naming her, he outlined the situation of a high-performing employee becoming homeless while maintaining her professional responsibilities. We nearly lost one of our most valuable assets because we failed to see what was happening right in front of us, he concluded. That's not just a human failure, it's a business failure. Maya, sitting quietly at the back of the room, watched as Alexander Reeves, known for his cold logic, made an impassioned case for corporate compassion as sound business strategy. The board's resistance gradually gave way to reluctant agreement to a pilot program. It wasn't full approval, but it was a start. In early March, Juniper Chen passed away peacefully with Maya and Eli at her bedside. Alexander cleared his schedule when Maya called with the news, something the old Alexander would never have considered for an employee's family matter. The funeral was small, a handful of relatives, some hospital staff who had grown close to Juniper, Maya's former co-workers from previous jobs. Alexander sat in the back row, feeling like an intruder in this private grief, yet knowing his presence mattered. After the service, he approached Maya, who stood straight-backed beside her brother, accepting condolences with quiet grace. Words felt inadequate, so Alexander simply stood beside them, a silent presence as others came and went. Later, at the modest reception, Alexander overheard Eli explaining to a cousin, "Mom made Maya promise we'd be okay, and we are. We have a real apartment now, and Maya has a real good job with Mr. Alexander." The simple trust in the boy's voice made Alexander turn away, unexpectedly moved. When Maya returned to work the following week, Alexander didn't expect the perfect efficiency of before. Instead, he found himself impressed by a different kind of strength, the resilience that allowed her to grieve while moving forward, to acknowledge her pain without being defined by it. During their program development meeting, Maya seemed distracted, uncharacteristically hesitant. "What is it?" Alexander asked. Maya took a deep breath. "My mother believed everyone deserves dignity, especially in their darkest moments," she said. "I'd like the employee program to reflect that principle." Alexander nodded, understanding what remained unspoken. This would be Juniper Chen's legacy, a way for her daughter to honor her memory through helping others. "Then that's exactly what we'll build," he promised and meant it. 6 months after Maya's rehiring, the Quantum Employee Resilience Program launched company-wide. Maya, now officially Director of Employee Well-Being, oversaw implementation with the same quiet efficiency she had brought to her assistant role, but with newfound authority that impressed even her critics. The program's first major case involved a talented software engineer whose wife's sudden MS diagnosis had created financial strain and childcare challenges. Instead of losing the employee to a competitor offering higher salary, Quantum provided targeted support, temporary housing near the office, priority childcare placement, medical bill negotiation assistance. The engineer not only stayed but delivered a major project ahead of schedule, publicly crediting the program for making it possible. Similar successes followed. Alexander found himself genuinely proud of what they'd created, particularly when industry publications began taking notice. "Quantum Innovations redefines corporate responsibility," read one headline. More satisfying was the internal transformation, a subtle shift in company culture as employees began to see the organization not just as a place to work but as a community invested in their well-being. Alexander and Maya settled into a new professional relationship, no longer boss and assistant but collaborators with complementary strengths. "You've created something remarkable here," Alexander told her after a particularly successful quarter. Maya shook her head. "We created it together. You provided the opportunity and resources. I just filled in the details." It was characteristic understatement from someone who had fundamentally reshaped the company's approach to its people. More striking was the change in Alexander himself. The ruthless perfectionist remained in his business decisions, but a new dimension had emerged. An awareness of the human costs behind the numbers, a willingness to consider factors beyond the bottom line. Meanwhile, Eli thrived in his new school, his diabetes well-managed, his natural intelligence fostered by stability and adequate resources. Watching the boy grow more confident each week, Alexander sometimes wondered who had truly saved whom in this unexpected partnership. The Wall Street Journal feature came as a surprise, the company that cares. How quantum innovations is disrupting traditional corporate culture. The reporter had interviewed employees at all levels, documenting the impact of the resilience program on everything from recruitment to productivity. The article positioned quantum as a pioneer in a new approach to business that recognized employee well-being as a strategic asset rather than an expendable cost. At the company-wide celebration of the article's publication, Alexander did something unprecedented. He publicly credited Maya for transforming the company. 2 years ago, Quantum was successful by every traditional metric, he told the assembled staff. But we were missing something fundamental, and understanding that our greatest resource isn't our technology or our market position, but the humans who make it all possible. He gestured to Maya, who looked uncomfortable with the attention. Maya Chin didn't just create a program, she showed us a better way to define success. The applause was genuine, the respect in the room palpable. The article had included anonymous stories of employees helped by the program, a single parent facing eviction, a team member with catastrophic medical bills, a promising intern living in their car, all now stable, productive, and fiercely loyal to the company that had seen them as people first, workers second. The program's data told a compelling business story, too. Decreased turnover, reduced absenteeism, improved productivity, strengthened recruitment. What had begun as a personal awakening for Alexander had become a business case study in enlightened self-interest. Industry competitors were now implementing similar programs, sometimes hiring away quantum employees to help design them. Rather than seeing this as a threat, Alexander encouraged the trend. Good ideas deserve to spread, he told Maya when she raised concerns about competitors copying their model. Besides, we'll keep innovating. Maya smiled at that, the expression transforming her usually serious face. You sound like my mother, she said. She always believed helping others wasn't just the right thing to do, it was the smart thing. On a clear spring morning 2 years after Maya's return to Quantum, Alexander stood beside her at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Juniper Chan Residential Center. Located 3 blocks from Quantum headquarters, the building contained 30 fully furnished apartments reserved for employees facing housing crises, evictions, natural disasters, domestic violence, medical emergencies. My mother always said home isn't just a place, but a foundation, Maya told the gathered crowd, her voice steady despite the emotion visible in her eyes. Without that foundation, nothing else can stand securely. Eli, now 11 and thriving, stood proudly beside his sister, no longer the frightened child sleeping in a car, but a confident boy with a bright future. The residential center represented more than just emergency housing. It embodied a philosophy that had transformed Quantum from within. Each apartment included wraparound services, financial counseling, healthcare navigation, childcare coordination, and transportation assistance. The model had proven so successful that 3 other major corporations in the city had partnered with Quantum to expand access for their own employees. What had begun as one CEO's awakening had sparked a movement within the business community. After the ceremony, Alexander and Maya walked through the building, inspecting the thoughtfully designed spaces. When I fired you, I thought I was upholding a standard of excellence, Alexander said quietly. I didn't understand that true excellence isn't about perfection, it's about resilience. Maya nodded, considering his words. And I thought keeping my problems hidden was professionalism, she replied. I didn't understand that silence can cost everyone more than speaking up. They paused at a window overlooking the city, the same skyline Alexander had contemplated from his penthouse office, but viewed now from a completely different perspective. My mother would be proud, Maya said softly. Not just of this building with her name, but of how many lives we've changed. Alexander thought about his own journey. From the ruthless perfectionist who fired an employee without asking a single question to a leader who understood that strength came not from denying human frailty but from supporting each other through it. Success isn't measured by what you gain, he said, echoing words Maya had shared from her mother's wisdom, but by what you give when you have nothing left to lose. Maya was leaving now to launch her own foundation with Alexander's backing, a natural evolution of their partnership. The foundation would expand the quantum model to small businesses without resources to create their own programs, creating a network of support across the city's employment landscape. Alexander would miss their daily collaboration, but he understood her need to extend this work beyond quantum's walls. Their paths had crossed at exactly the right moment, her determination teaching him compassion, his resources enabling her vision. Together, they had created something neither could have built alone. As they walked back toward the ceremony, Eli ran up with a small gift box. "Mom would want you to have this," he told Alexander, handing him the package. Inside was a simple framed photo of Juniper Chin with her children, the same image Alexander had found in Maya's notebook years earlier. Written on the back in careful handwriting were the words that had become the motto of their program. "The true measure of strength is how we lift each other." If you found this story meaningful, please like, subscribe, and share with friends who might need this reminder that sometimes our greatest failures can lead to our most important transformations. Comment below with what resonated most with you. Was it Alexander's awakening, Maya's resilience, or the ripple effect that changed an entire company culture? How might your workplace benefit from similar compassion and understanding? Remember that behind every perfect colleague might be an untold story of extraordinary courage.